Thank you so much for that, Sherry. I'd like to thank ClimateWest for having us here. Anytime we get to talk about standards, trust me, it's more fun than you can imagine. I hope to prove you right today that standards are fun. I know all you think about is documents, but I'm here talking about building resilience, the role of standards in advancing climate-ready infrastructure. Um, I have Mentimeters set up, I hope, with a few questions. First question, just to say, what comes to mind? When you hear of the word standards, what's one word that comes to mind? So please grab your phones. I want to see what you all think. So I know whether I'm in friendly territory or enemy territory or begging territory. Okay, safety, bedtime, ooh, more work, rules. Okay, so we're seeing some more answers coming in. I like these actually. I think I'll take this back to SCC. When you hear standards, you think of bedtime. Okay, quality, safety, best practice. Yes, codes, guidance. Okay, all right. Let's go to question 2. And it's literally a yes, no, not yet question. Have you ever used standards? What that means is that we test those who are testing. So we test the testers and we make sure that everything is in accordance. We represent Canada on the world standard and accreditation stage. So I saw in Roger's presentation, he spoke about ISO 31000. That's what Standard Council of Canada does. We represent Canada in those conversations with International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO, International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC. So we're the ones that go to represent Canada in those forums. So my presentation is just 3 points, hopefully, and hoping to get through this. What are standards? Standards to support resilience and infrastructure program, which is a program I'm so delighted to work with, and give a few spotlights to some standards that are hopefully applicable to those in this room. So the definition of a standard is up here. Hopefully you all can see it. But standards, basically, definition of insanity, people know what that is. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different results. Standards are the opposite. We do the same thing over and over again, expecting the exact same results. So what we try to do is we make sure that there's a process in place where you're getting quality. And so what that does is that when standards are used correctly, you have a product that's safe to use. You have a person that has the right skills to do the job that they need to do, or infrastructure is solidly and soundly built. So when you use standards correctly, hopefully this is what you're getting. Standards are usually voluntary unless made mandatory. And the way they're made mandatory is when they're now included in codes. So unless a standard is included in a code or a piece of legislation, it's usually voluntary. And anyone can write a standard. I'm sure you all work with different kinds of standards, private, industry. You can write a standard no matter who you are. However, there's a different kind of standard that's a national standard of Canada. And so what makes a national standard of Canada? Basically is what you see. Again, we work with we have, I think, about 13 standard development organizations that help develop standards. And what is very peculiar about it is that it goes through a rigorous process that's accredited by SCC to ensure that you're getting the best quality of standard possible. We ask our SDOs to have a balanced interest. So we want people with a range of expertise. For example, I work with water a lot. If you have a water standard coming out, we want people that work with water, we want people that work with municipalities, we want engineers, we want a balance of interest across the board. But we're also very heavy on geographical representation. If it is a national standard of Canada, we want to make sure that all of Canada, as much as possible, is represented through the process. We also want to make sure that it's a consensus-based decision-making. So not one person making that decision, not one province having a higher influence. We want to make sure it's well represented across the board. We also want transparency, inclusivity, and available in both official languages. So that's what makes a national standard of Canada. It usually takes time to develop one, about 18 months to 2 years. So it is a very rigorous process that goes through a very specific step, a couple of steps. If you want to know more about this, I could show you a graphic, but I didn't want to scare anyone in the room today, so I just brought this. So what are benefits of this NSCs, which is what we call them? First, well assured is nationally vetted. It's always nice to kind of have the background knowing that this standard has gone through a process where the right people, hopefully with the balanced expertise, balanced geographical representation, have come to vet this document. Another thing is that it reduces effort. So a lot of municipalities, a lot of provinces are developing standards of their own. We have a whole bunch of standards at the federal level that are easily customizable for whatever use they need. So if you want to start a standard, I would highly suggest you come to SCC and ask if there's a standard already, rather than building it from scratch. We leverage state-of-the-art knowledge and expertise. So we're ensuring that the right people are in the room, the best experts are in the room, helping us develop the standards. And last, it demonstrates that you're meeting duty of care. You've done your due diligence when you go through the standards. And again, you can always blame SCC if anything goes wrong with any of those standards. So Standards to Support Resilience in Infrastructure Program, we call it SHRIP. It's a very weird acronym, but that's what we call it. And so I heard someone talk about the national adaptation strategies today. I just want to say that some of these work streams are supported by the National Adaptation Strategy. So we have 6 work streams right now, one that's specific to northern infrastructure, one that has to do with strengthening assets against extreme weather events, one that's integrating risk management. We have a body of work, an amazing body of work on nature-based solutions, low carbon building materials, as well as climate resilient transportation. So this is just phase 1 and 2 of the program. We are in the process of kickstarting phase 3. So these work streams will probably change. There'll probably be addition of some work streams. So looking forward to what that is. Time to highlight some standards. I told you it was going to be fun. All right, so first, what is the problem that standards can solve? The first box says it. So climate impacts lead to environmental stress. We all agree on that. We're all stressed right now, aren't we? So it accumulates to environmental stress on the built environment and infrastructure. So it's always important to have infrastructure that's climate resilient. And so what's the solution to that is that you have standards that can specify performance and material requirements that are used to address these climate risks. But standards are not usually flexible. So if it's not flexible enough or if it's not mandated, then what's the solution? So that's some standards, a lot of standards actually, have been developed with historical climate data. I heard someone ask about IDF curves. We have a standard for that just came out last year about incorporating that into more climate considerations and decisions. Standards are voluntary by default. I said that already. So usually it's not enforced. But what happens is that we are currently by updating existing standards to reflect some of these changes. We're asking for more climate considerations to be involved, so it's not based on historical climate data, but based on climate projections as well. And we're seeking users, which is why I'm here, to proactively seek out this standard. So when you're coming up with a standard, a guideline, when you need help, we're hoping you're thinking of SCC, thinking of CSA to say, oh, do they have a standard for that I can use? So high winds. How many people have experienced high winds in the room? Exactly. It is a problem. And so what happens is when high winds happen, many low-rise residential buildings, I'm sure none of this is new to you. Like, these are all consequences that a lot of you have faced by being in the provinces you are. So when you look at Hurricane Fiona in 2022, roofs were torn off buildings. There were shattered windows. Houses were removed from their foundation. I mean, trees were damaged, which I have a forestry background, so that was a personal jab at my heart. Trees were damaged, but then the damaged trees also caused damage to built infrastructure. Power lines were damaged. And so what we do is that we have a standard for that. CSA S520 is a standard that talks about design and construction of low-rise residential and small buildings to resist high wind. So this is intended for low-rise residential buildings with the hope that they can enhance building integrity. You have a more resilient design that can withstand those damages, and then stronger materials as well as better installation practices. So does this mean that when high winds come after using this standard, your building wouldn't get damaged? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that it's more repairable. What it means is that it's more resilient. And so the recommendations in this guide, well, in this standard, are for new construction. However, parts of it can be used for existing infrastructure or existing buildings. And so I have a QR code up here, so I know the PowerPoint slides will be shared afterwards, so you can take a look at that. Extreme heat in playgrounds. This one is personal to anybody that loves playgrounds as much as I do, still love my swings. But when people go out in public, when you have little children that go to the playgrounds, and I don't know if you've seen the way they are excited about being in the playgrounds, they get carried away. And so they're not even able to notice I'm getting dehydrated. They're not able to notice I'm getting overheated. And so one of the things that happens is when they have pre-existing conditions, this can quickly become an emergency. So we all know about the urban heat island effect, whereby cities, building cities takes away some of that green structure, causes infrastructure that actually absorbs heat rather than releasing it. And so we have a report that came out in 2022 where we're just looking at what is the effect of urban heat island. And so we mapped it out, so you can take a look at that document. And we have a solution for that. So we have CSA Z614, which is a standard on children's playground equipment. And the entire goal of this document is to make playgrounds safer when there's extreme heat, when there's higher temperatures. And we also have a guide, Designing Climate-Ready Playgrounds, that contains design ideas on how to make those playgrounds better, at least when there's a higher temperature, to make it better suited for children to be able to play in. And so they're not going through risks of overheating as much. We have a whole bunch of resources on Standards Council of Canada that on just urban heat. So I invite you to take a look at that. Oh, sorry, it's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay, so another thing is equity lens. I just spoke about children being at risk. Certain populations are at higher risk of being impacted by climate change. And so, as you can tell, I'm having issues with this, but I'll get it right eventually. There we go. Okay, so women. In a lot of countries, in a lot of third world countries, in lower income communities, you have women that are disproportionately affected by climate change, people with disabilities, seniors, racialized peoples, and indigenous populations. Again, this is something, everyone doesn't experience the same extreme event the same way. So you need resources to be able to provide some equity lens or framework. And so why would we need an equity lens? It mitigates legal risks. So you're making sure that you have the right things in place to be able to address climate change in the right neighborhoods, in the right ways. It builds resilience, it reduces loss and damage, it meets the needs of community, it builds trust. When a community knows you're approaching a problem with equity lens, they all feel equally valued. And so that's something that's very important. I know we spoke about trust earlier today. This is a good way to build trust with the communities using such guides. It drives innovation. And so we have a guide that came out last year on applying inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility within climate resilient infrastructure. And so this gives a framework basically of how you can apply climate considerations into any program you're carrying out, into building resilient infrastructure. It gives an equity lens that's very much needed, very important, again, to build that trust. And so when you use this guide, you're basically designing, frameworks that are able to cater to everybody. You're also increasing value engineering. Construction planning process is much better. It gives you a starting point. So even if you're someone that's thinking more about equity, this is a good guide that you can at least go to and say, you know what, how do I even start to broach that topic? It gives you information on what to consider. So what do you consider when you're carrying out these processes? We have a whole host of resources. I only showed you 3 standards today, but we have a whole host of resources on our website. The link is right here. We have a published page of all kind of SHRIP projects, and there's going to be more added. We have a bunch more in the works. So I invite you to scan the QR code, or when you get the slides, please click on the links and find some of standards, because we have a bunch there that are available, customizable, and hopefully are going to get easier to use once you get more familiar with them. So with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to ClimateWest again for having us. And yes, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. So are there any in the room? Again, I can walk over there if the dinner's settling in and you don't want to get up to the mic. But there are some online if you guys need a minute to think about it. Okay, let's start off with one of the ones online. What role do standards perform to include innovations?
So again, one of the things that standards do is that we really leverage the most available, inclusive knowledge as possible. We get a lot of experts. We're fortunate to have a whole bunch of experts that perform, their due diligence in making sure they get the knowledge they need. Again, because SCC is in a very unique position of representing Canada on the international stage, what we have is that we visit some of these ISO conferences and we get really good ideas from other countries that have done it before us. We get all those innovation, we bring it back and say, you know what, maybe we should incorporate these into our standards. So we have access to information, not just here, but also outside of Canada as well through some of those meetings, some of those conversations.
Okay. And I had a quick follow-up for that, because you have standards, but you also have guidebooks, which you presented. Like you have different levels. So if it's an innovation, you might not have as much data, but you'll present a level of different kind of standard or document, right?
So we do not only produce standards, that's why. So we have standards, we have publicly available specifications, we have technical specifications. I highlighted standards today, but we have a whole bunch of standardization solutions beyond just standards alone. Some of them, and the benefits to having the different kinds of standardization solutions, like I said, the NSCs take 18 months to 2 years. We have different solutions that take less. For example, you would have a publicly available specification that takes 9 months to develop. And then that one is available not just to SDOs, Standard Development Organizations, but we can ask any organization to go ahead and do that. Someone that has expertise in that field to be like, would you like to develop, a publicly available specification on this topic? So that helps us to really get the best knowledge in the room.
See this question up here?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I also like standards and templates and things like that. I'm wondering, you mentioned that most of these are voluntary and that, it has to be legislated for things to become mandatory. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, because people don't do things unless they have to a lot of the time. Like I grew up in Australia, it's mandatory to vote, so we have a high turnout. We don't have that in Canada. We have a low turnout. Yeah, if you could just maybe give us a bit of an insight into maybe why some things are voluntary, and if there's a way to make them not, that would be great.
In an ideal world, I know this is being broadcast, whatever. In an ideal world, I'd like to shove my standards into everybody's offices and like use them. But that's the nature of the standards. A lot of the standards, even the development process, requires a lot of volunteer hours. And so we try to make sure that we have the best knowledge possible, the best practices. Unfortunately, unless legislated, we cannot force them down people's throat. That's just how it is. But one thing that we have noticed is that the more people are aware of how standards can help, the more people are aware of what standards are possible, what standards are available, they tend to use it because it really minimizes the work they have to do. So the real key to this is effective and efficient standardization. Also, there's also a uniformity that comes across not having to go and source everything out for yourself when the work has been done on that level. So the key selling point for us is that this is being done on a level, is being funded. It can halve, how much time, effort, resources you put into it, because we have something already that you can build on. So that's it for now. The legislation, unless it's put in a code, in a building code, unless it's put in a legislative, sentence, it's not going to be mandatory. It can't be enforced, basically.
Or municipal bylaws.
Or municipal bylaws, yes.
Just so you know, that's a tool.
Put pressure on the municipalities.
Exactly. Do you have any more questions in the room, or we can go to the online ones? Okay, you touched base on this in your presentation, but what specific standards exist for climate resilient transportation systems, specifically rail and airports?
Oh, we have a bunch. So, okay, so really, I have a colleague that works on this stream of work, but I recently completed one that had to do with rail systems and trying to navigate the effects of flooding as well. But again, it's all about understanding that these are all coming down the pipeline. So in the next, I think 6 months, 7 months, 10 months, you'll probably be seeing more resilient transportation coming out because it's a relatively new stream of work compared to the other ones that we have. But we have some on roads, we have some on bridges, we have some on railway systems. So we have a bunch coming down soon. They're not yet published as of yet because it's a newer stream of work.
Excellent. I'm looking around the room, Oh, over there, perfect. Are you making your way? Okay, perfect.
Hey, thank you for your presentation. When I think about resilience, I think in the capacity of absorption, adaptation, of course, and transformation. So my question for you is any of the standards, multiple standards that you have available, is addressing transformation of the infrastructure? Thank you.
That's a great question. So we're solidly in the adaptation space. That's something that we have said with our supporting resilience program is solidly adaptation. We're not dealing with mitigation. We're not dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, reduction, all of that. It's solidly adapting to extreme events. And so because of that, it addresses adaptation squarely. So all our standards do, all our guides do address adaptation. On the transformation level, not quite as much because again, we can't enforce it. So we do address, for example, how would you navigate a road if there was like extreme heavy precipitation? It's more about adapting to today's circumstances rather than the future, but preparing the infrastructure for today for the future while doing so. So not as much transformation. It addresses resilience, it addresses adaptation, but again, because it can't be enforced, we keep it very, we can't push our buttons too much. So we're trying to be nice about it.
Okay, let's go to another online one. Are you aware of any municipalities that are successfully drawing on existing standards to deeply inform their climate adaptation planning and implementation?
Which is very interesting because yes, and the reason why is because I can't mention the exact names of municipalities, but for example, CSA Group, whenever they have some of these standards being developed, on their technical committees, they have municipal representatives. They draw on City of Ottawa, City of Toronto, a whole bunch of municipalities actually help to inform the standards. One of the most awesome people I know from City of Calgary, his name is Bert. He is so passionate about this work and he's very much involved. So municipalities are usually on the technical committees that help to inform this work. So they are using it, and once they use it, they push it out to their own municipalities in different forms, in different ways. So I can't give any specific examples. That's something we're hoping to do in our next phase of work, is to actually track, but it's kind of difficult because like I said, standards are not always used in its entirety. Some people pick and choose. And so sometimes when they pick and choose, they do not give credit. So we're not able to track that as much. But that's something we're working on the next phase of this project.
Good. And if you're looking for them as they come up, we feature a lot of these on Climate Insight, just as shameless self-plug. So, okay, we have time for one more question. And we've talked a lot about two-eyed seeing today, so I'm going to pick that one. To what extent is two-eyed seeing engaged in the development of national standards related to climate and community development?
So very much so. That's our hope. I actually just spoke to Thomas yesterday to say, hey, would like to involve this more on the built infrastructure side. However, our program, one of the 6 work streams that I showed was northern specific standards. That's a program that has been running for, I think, over 10 years now, whereby we have a Northern Advisory Committee. We are working on standards specifically for Northern and Indigenous communities. We've been doing that for over 10 years. Now we're trying to bring it more into the mainstream part of the standards to ensure that it's not just focused on that, but it's being addressed through other standards as well. So that's something that we hopefully see increasing in the next phase of this work. But we have been addressing Northern specific standards for over 10 years now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's our end of our time. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.